ठीक है।
ਇਹਨੂੰ ਬੰਦ ਕਰ ਲਾ ਲੀਡ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਅਜੇ ਨਾ ਕਰਿਆ ਕੁਛ
ਮਾਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਮਿਊਟ ਕਰ ਲੈ, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਸੁਣਦੀ ਆ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੀ।
Welcome to all members of the council, as well as members of the public who may be watching online. Before the meeting formally begins, Reverend Andy Johnson from St. Nicholas Church, Perryville, will bless the meeting.
Well, thank you. To open your meeting this evening. I bring you greetings from St. Nicholas Church, Perryville, obviously a part of the borough, Mr. Mayor, that you know extremely well, and has been my home for the last 4 years. Nicholas is a very small Church of England congregation. Many people would think insignificant, but we are faithfully doing our best to follow Jesus Christ's instruction to love God and love our neighbour as ourselves. In September, we will be opening as Ealing Food Bank's latest centre. There's great food poverty within my parish, as indeed there is around the whole borough. Thank you for all the work that you do as councillors to help alleviate poverty such as this. I wonder whether you would agree with me that today, this week, there is renewed anxiety within our communities. Our so-called Freedom Day has come and gone. As restrictions have lifted, and we're now faced with a series of personal decisions about how we are to greet one another, how much distance to keep from each other, whether or not to wear a mask. In this chamber, you will have to navigate your way through this minefield of decision-making for many months, maybe even years to come. As you do that, may I humbly offer you those same words of Jesus Christ once again. Love God and love your neighbour as yourself. I fully recognise there are a whole range of religious beliefs represented. Or some will profess no faith. Loving your neighbour as yourself, really a religious junction. It's a fundamental premise of living well together within a community, within any well-functioning and tolerant society. And if we do that, wearing a face mask or respecting someone's space is not about me and my freedoms. It's about, fundamentally, about my neighbour and her needs and her desires and her preferences. Just imagine with me for one moment how much better you look if people truly loved their neighbour as themselves. And so at the commencement of this council meeting tonight, please allow me to lead us in a prayer to that effect. Let us pray. Loving God, thank you for the borough, the wards and the individual communities in which you have placed us. During this time of uncertainty and unease, please help us to lay down our selfish desires, to prefer one another's needs, and to truly love our neighbour as ourselves. And God, I pray for the men and women in this chamber and online today who have chosen to serve us in local government. I thank you for them, each one. Make them wise for such a time as this, good at listening to each other and to us, considerate at their core, and desiring to serve with wholeheartedness and with joy. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Reverend Andy Johnson. You can walk down, and if you want to sit here, you can sit, and if you want to go, you are free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Helen, can I ask you if you would like to come and sit here, please? Councillors, it's very hot in the room, so you are free to take your jackets off if you prefer and feel easy. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast live and a recording retained on the Council's YouTube channel. Therefore, I will presume everyone consents to this happening. If you do not consent to this, then you should leave the meeting. We will be testing the council capabilities to hold part remote, part in-person council meetings. You may hear this referred to as a hybrid meeting. This means there are a number of councillors who will be joining us remotely. These members will not be counted as formally being in attendance at this meeting for the purpose of Section 85 of the Local Government Act 1972. However, their virtual attendance will be recorded in the minutes under item 1. The members in attendance virtually will be able to speak at the meeting, but won't be able to take part in any vote. So I start with the apologies. Any apologies?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've had apologies for absence from Councillor Sumner.
Noted. Moving on, declaration of interest. I haven't received any, but is there any declaration of interest to be noted here?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I just read through the list of those who are in attendance virtually for the benefit of those in the room? Is that okay? Yeah. We do have Councillor Dinser, Councillor Rye, Lusuardi, Summers, Daniel and Kate Crawford, Gary Busuttil, Councillor Stafford, Councillor Cordier, Councillor Chohan, Councillor Ball, Councillor Mohan, Councillor Conlon, Councillor Driscoll, Councillor Ahmed, Councillor Dadwell, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Roon,
Can't hear anything, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's all gone quiet.
that Councillor P. Anand wanted to. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, can't hear. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shahbaz Ahmed here. I'm logged in remotely. I can't hear.
Councillor Mayor, sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's same with me.
Yeah,
Councillor.
they know Ranjit. None of us can hear. They're trying to fix him.
Okay,
Okay, councillors, those who are attending virtually, I am logged into my system as well, so you can put a message if necessary. Thank you. So I move on to the item, second item on the agenda, declaration of interest. I have got none. So the next item is matter to be considered in private, and again, I have none. We move on to the minutes of the last meeting that was held on 22nd of June, 2021. Do we agree that the minutes are true record? Thank you. Also, we want to ratify those minutes that the meeting we held on 22nd of June. Are they ratified? Thank you. Yeah, Sam, you want them to be signed or it's okay? Thank you. Members and members of the public watching tonight's proceedings, today is Eid al-Adha, and millions of Muslims, including myself, are celebrating. This Eid is about sacrificing and sharing, and we must make the most of it by looking after those who are less privileged. So all those celebrating all over the globe, Eid Mubarak. I'm glad to say that activity has been picking up in the mayoralty as COVID restrictions have lifted. Since the last council meeting, I have attended several events, including opening a new post office in Greenford, the Greenford Scouts District Council AGM, and the Ealing BMX Club Awards. Last Friday, I attended the Moogsoft William Greaves Trophy at Lord's to support the team from Little Ealing Primary School, who were competing against teams from Tower Hamlets and Redbridge. The children were delighted to see the mayor supporting them, and I was pleased to be able to see them win the competition and present them with the trophy. So I congratulate whole Ealing and Little Ealing Primary School. I'm currently busy organizing my charity events for the year, and invitations will be sent shortly for the first events in autumn. I have been informed that Councillor Tim Murtag's wife gave birth to a baby boy, James Patrick Murtagh, on Saturday, 10th July. Congratulations to Councillor Murtagh and his family. Councillor Sumner gave his apologies today as he is recovering from hip surgery. I wish him a swift recovery. And I know we are all looking forward to seeing him back in the council chamber again very soon. Finally, I received a sad news this week. John Delaney, former councillor from Springfield and then Acton Central Ward between 1994 and 2006, passed away. I know John was a big character in Ealing politics and chaired the Planning East Committee for a number of years. John will be truly missed. I will now let representative from each party to say a few words about those who have known John. And I will start with Yvonne Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was talking to people yesterday and I thought I'd known John for 40 years, but Bridget, his partner, told me today on the phone that she'd been with him for 40 years, so I knew him for longer than that. John was a big character, a very kind man, a very robust man, but always prepared to give his time to others, to act as a mentor to new people who came onto the council. He believed in casework. He was born in South London, but moved as a child to Park Royal. His father worked for Guinness and he went to local Catholic schools. He didn't have a particularly enjoyable time at school, but then went to Chiswick Poly and took his O and A levels and went on to Leicester University, where he studied for a degree in politics. He later joined the civil service in the Home Office and became very active in the union. And he rose the union ranks to become a negotiator. And he was always very proud of the fact he represented beefeaters, coast guards, prison officers, all sorts of people, and he enjoyed that. And on his retirement, he then joined the council, as been mentioned. He didn't have a particularly enjoyable time at school, but then went to Chiswick Poly.
I'll try and ignore it. I'll try and ignore it and keep going.
And went on to
I
Leicester
imagine somebody's heckling
University,
me.
where
John may be heckling me from somewhere else. John had a sense of humour. He enjoyed being a councillor. Many of us enjoyed his friendship, his companionship over the years. I know that many people sitting here today knew him very well. I know people are nodding. He knew Bassan well, he knew Jasbir, Ray, etc. And I'm sorry if I don't mention people's names. He was a close friend of Glenn Barnum, who some of you may remember, John Gallagher, and Phil, who's sitting there. Phil was a very close friend. So we'll all miss him. John's had poor health for the past approximately 3 years, and he was in Neamtree in Greenford. And it's been quite hard for him, especially with lockdown. I haven't seen him since his birthday last year when there was a little gap, and he has had a difficult time in recent times. Bridget's coped with that quite well. I'm thinking of her, as we all are, and his family in this country and in Australia. He certainly was a big character. I always said he would have made an excellent mayor because the red robes would have suited him. He would have made an excellent Santa Claus, but he never got round to doing any of those things. He enjoyed his time on the council. We'll certainly miss him as a friend. We'll miss him in Ealing Common and Ealing Acton. He loved his sports. He loved QPR. He wants his ashes scattered in QPR, if that's allowed. He loved cricket. And I only found out recently, I think he had told me this, that his father had been a professional footballer for Arsenal, which had brought the family down to London. And many of you who knew him he loved football, he loved cricket. He took me to the Oval once, but I could never really get into it. So he'll be a missed person. He was a bigger than life character. I think we're all pleased to have known him, proud to have known him. And I think we will all send our respects and wishes to and condolences to Bridget. I have given the details of John's cremation at Mortlake, which he served on, to the Mayor's Parlour, and that's going to be sent out to people who can go. It will be the 5th of August. Bridget would like any
to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of a spring chicken. I won't repeat some of the bare bones of John's career. He'd been a passionate trade union official, but when he moved on, he transferred those passions to everything else that he did. And one of the things about John, I think, which made him such a big personality in our politics, was that he got on with everybody. He was very, very strongly Labour, but he was wholly inclusive in how he dealt with all parties around the council, all parties within the community. He was respected and admired across the borough and across the political spectrum. And due to the unfortunate death of a candidate, we were put back by 4. Moved in to appoint himself to all of the posts that John Delaney had previously held until our election happened and John was able to resume his place, which I think showed the respect that everybody held John in. Yvonne mentioned Phil Putwood. There's a kind of recurring theme, a thread running through John's political career in Ealing, which revolves around summit conferences between John and Phil in one hostelry or another around the borough, in which one or other of them would make plans for the other. So John and Phil, in the first of these summits, sketched out how John would transition from his professional career to the council. In the second of those, John sketched out how Phil would become mayor of the borough for the millennium, which he did. And in the third of these, in 2004, they sketched out between them a role swap in which John moved from being chair of regulatory and swapped with Phil, who was at that point cabinet member for streets and environment. And John took on that role, one that he pushed forward with the kind of passion that he'd previously brought to the planning process. And to show that he didn't just apply his politics to other people, when food waste was brought into the borough, he trialled it in his own ward so that any unpopularity that came from the introduction and the transition would come his way and not to some poor benighted colleague. He was passionate too about his outside bodies, West London Waste and Mortlake Crematorium. He served with both for many years with distinction and was vice chair of West London Waste. His passions included sport. He was very proud of having attended the 1966 World Cup final. I think events of the last week or two make that particularly poignant. He was a lover of good beer, but he saw the pub as an extension of his office. And many of us did business with John in those circumstances. And he was a social man and a warm man. And that, in a sense, was his métier. His other passion was travel. He loved to go on holiday, but to very specific and exotic places. The more exotic, the better. His great objective had been to visit every continent, and he kind of achieved that objective with a holiday in which his boat sailed just within a few hundred yards of the coast of Antarctica. And that was enough for John. He ticked it off. He could move forward. The thing I will recall most about John, beyond his warmth and friendship, is his relentless positivity. As Yvonne said, for many years, really, in latter life, John was cursed with poor health. But I never heard him complain about his situation, only ever heard him plan what was around the corner, what he would do next, what would happen when he got better. And he always did get better. For his 70th birthday, John circulated an invitation card to a party, which in a very self-knowing way was headed, "The day you thought would never happen." But it did happen. John did reach his 70th birthday, and well beyond it. He seemed indestructible to me. He seemed indestructible. And I think the timing of his passing is particularly cruel, given that I think many of us were looking forward, as Yvonne said, to seeing him again. And our thoughts are with Bridget. That is one of the very great partnerships, not just political partnerships, but partnerships in life. He was a big player in our politics. He was a big personality. And we will all, I think, miss him. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. On behalf of the Conservative group, Councillor Young will say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My favourite memory of John was him coming to OSC and defending an indefensible policy, which was getting rid of all the street cheese to save money. I think he may have enjoyed a bit of refreshment before the meeting, but the performance was quite entertaining as a result. I got to know him, funnily enough, a bit better once he'd left the council. I met him in a professional capacity along with his partner. He was always very genial. We discussed politics quite a bit. I was sorry that as the years progressed, his health deteriorated, and so he couldn't get around as well as he used to. But he was always very friendly, and I'm sure I shall miss him. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, Councillor Malcolm, you would like to say a few words?
It was flashing. It was someone who I met at the beginning of my career before he left the council a few years later. And in his role as portfolio holder for the environmental matters, when he attended the Southfield Recreation Grounds in Southfield to open a revamped playground. And as most portfolio holders you would expect to be, someone from the media team was there to get the right photograph at the right angle. But of course, John wasn't really interested in having his face in a council magazine or on a website. He was interested in just saying hello to the children and to the parents. And so he was sort of a bit of a tough character sometimes. He didn't play by those rules that all the people in politics wanted to. He just got on and did what he needed to do in that role as a portfolio holder. He was a real character and often would chat to people. Certainly Councillor Ball and myself had many conversations in the past with him when he was not a councillor, after his time as a councillor. And I was lucky enough to share a number of games playing cricket, where myself and John watched a number of games of cricket together, having a beer. And those times were quite good. And it's a shame his health did deteriorate recently. But I do think that there is a lot more alike in many councillors and people, and we need to sort of reflect on that sometimes. His death is certainly a sad loss, and the Lib Dem group pay tribute to Bridget, his family and his friends.
Thank you. As a mark of respect, I will ask the council to hold 1 minute silence to remember John Delaney. Thank you. So we go back to our agenda item 6, Petition from members of public, and I haven't received any. Number 7, petition from member of the council. I haven't got any. Item number 8, question from the member of public, and I haven't received any. So we move on to item 9, question from the members of the council. And I'm going to ask councillors to keep to the time. And we will start with Councillor Milliken to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So my question to Councillor Costigan is, how many responses to date have there been on the council's commonplace platform, and what percentage wanted the LTNs removed or indeed to remain?
Thank you very much, Councillor Milliken, for the question. Just to let you know, I'm sure you're probably aware because there's been a lot of publicity, but the consultation on our 9 low traffic neighbourhoods is still open. So that consultation is still ongoing. And as part of that, the commonplace platform is also still open and people can put their thoughts and feelings on that platform. We will be closing the consultation this Friday, the 23rd, and at that point, we'll be analysing the results of our CPZ style consultation, as well as the commonplace results to that point, and they'll all be in a final report when we're making the decision. So I can't tell you, Councillor Milliken, I can't tell you what the final results will be, but so far as of April, the results, the numbers of people responding on commonplace was 2,590 different responses. We'll see how that looks compared to the response to the CPZ style consultation. I have a feeling it will be quite a high response rate, but let's wait and see till after this Friday. You can actually see the full details of the different percentages in the interim report on low traffic neighbourhoods that went to Cabinet in December 2020. And that has all of the details to that point. And we did actually use the commonplace findings, as well as the emails, the many emails we've received into the traffic notices inbox to make amendments to the experimental traffic orders. And that included in ANPR instead of using barriers, and also to allow blue badge exemptions for residents in LTNs who have a blue badge. And we know there's really strong feelings on low traffic neighbourhoods in the borough, and that is why we are doing this consultation. A decision needs to be made, and we want to make sure that local people get that final chance to have their say and let us know what they now feel after about 11 months of the schemes being in place. I'm not really quite sure why the Conservative group aren't in favour of consultation. I think it's a great thing myself. And like I say, a response whether residents think it's a great thing. I think they'll vote with their feet. I think they'll be out filling in that consultation, and I look forward to a really high turnout rate. Thank you, Councillor Milliken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Costigan. Yes, like yourself, I hope there is a very high response rate to the consultation, and I'm sure there will be. But you referenced the December interim report, and at that, I can tell you it was 76% at that time on the commonplace platform. So just to put a benchmark there. But my question to you, though, is if the consultation of LTNs once again shows that the majority of residents are opposed to the LTNs, will the council commit to finally listening to residents and not go back for a third consultation, just so that you get the results you want?
Thanks, Councillor Milliken. And yes, absolutely, you're correct about the findings from the previous set of results from the commonplace platform. And as I say, we used those findings in order to make changes to traffic orders. And that's why we brought in automatic number plate recognition. And that's also why we brought in the blue badge exemption. So we did use all of that information, and also the many emails, a lot of them very detailed, from residents explaining, what they liked about the low traffic neighbourhoods and what they didn't like. So we used all of that information to make changes, and we'll continue to look at what comes through on commonplace. In terms of the decision-making process, we've been absolutely clear. We'll be making a decision. There's been 11 months, almost 12 months of these experimental traffic orders. I think that's a decent amount of time for an experiment. So we will be making a decision, and we are giving people that final say, and we want to put residents in the driving seat. We are, and we have made it clear, an open, inclusive and transparent council. We want to work with local people on active travel. We know we can't do it by telling people what to do. We have to bring people on board and work in partnership. That is why we're doing this consultation. And yet again, I'm really confused why the Conservative group doesn't support that consultation. I would have thought you might have thought it was a good idea, but clearly you don't want to put residents in the driving seat like we do. Thank you.
Councillor Ray Wall will ask a second supplementary.
Can the portfolio holder give an update on the current e-scooter trial in Ealing?
Thanks, Councillor Wall. So low traffic neighbourhoods are part of a suite of actions that we're taking in relation to active travel. And active travel is all about getting people out of their cars, which produce horrible emissions that have an effect on the Earth's atmosphere and cause air pollution, which really means people in London are dying. So we want to get people out of their cars and to travel in a more active way. And some of the ways that we are backing include walking, cycling, and also scooting. I'll just mention cycling first, though, because we do have an electric cycle scheme in the borough, the Lime Cycle Scheme. And I should just say that we are looking at extending that. And we're looking at perhaps extending it in the kind of Southall direction potentially, and also having more electric bikes in the borough. So I think that'd be really fantastic. It gives people another option. But in addition to that, we are one of a very small number of elite boroughs in London who decided to get involved in the Transport for London pilot of e-scooters. Now, there's actually tens of thousands, there's an unbelievable number of e-scooters on the streets of London. And I have to tell you today, they're all illegal unless they're in our trial. They're all illegal. So we want to get involved in this e-scooter trial because we want to see how could e-scooters be regulated in the future so that they work for people. Our e-scooters, you have to have a driving license. It only goes 12 miles per hour. They all have a bell. And there are rules. There's what they call geofencing, which means basically you can't ride into areas that aren't in the trial. And you go slow in some areas as well. So suddenly you come to a shuddering halt on your e-scooter. But just to tell you that so far, up until last week, in the borough, we'd had 15,902 journeys via e-scooter. So I think that's a great success just in the first month of this trial. And that covered over 44,000 kilometres. Like I say, you do actually need a driving license. So I haven't been able to test them out myself, but I know Councillor Mahmood is really keen on e-scooters. So I'm hoping we can get him on one and maybe I can take a picture of him, but I can't get on it myself, so I'm quite disappointed. I should say, I have also met with Guide Dogs for the Blind, and they're very keen to work with us because they also want to see regulation in the future of e-scooters. And they think the trial is a really great way of doing that. And they support the trial that we're involved in. So we're hoping that this will lead to further increases in people getting out of their cars and riding along the cycle paths, because you're not allowed to cycle on the pavement in the e-scooters, so on the cycle paths and the roads, rather than being in their car. I should say,
Councillor.
I've been told that there was 5 complaints about people not parking their, because this in the whole, so far in a month, there's been 5 complaints about people not parking their e-scooters correctly. And 3 of those complaints were from me. So I'm going to stop complaining, otherwise our stats would be amazing. Thank you very much, Councillor Wall.
Thank you. Before the next question, I would like to remind those who are virtually watching, if you want to ask a second supplementary, you can message me on the system. And those who are attending in the chamber, they can raise hand and indicate it. Thank you. Now, the next question, Councillor Rai to Councillor Raza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since the Euros final, we've seen a grotesque amount of racist abuse directed at England penalty takers. Given that the Prime Minister has repeatedly failed to take this issue seriously and Tory MPs have boycotted games because players have taken the knee, what is our council doing to help stamp out racism and discrimination in Ealing?
Unlike the Home Secretary defending people who boycott England games over taking the knee 1 minute and cheering the national team the next, in Ealing, we're absolutely committed to stamping out racism and discrimination. Fighting inequality is one of the 3 priorities of our council plan, and we're here to listen. I'm proud that our council established an independent Race Equality Commission in 2020 in direct response to the issues raised by Black Lives Matter movement. The commission, chaired by leading anti-racism activist Lord Simon Woolley, is listening to people in Ealing talk about their experiences and what they think about that needs to change. They're taking evidence from leaders from across the different sectors, including health, housing, the police, education, employment, challenging them on their plans to address racism and discrimination in Ealing. The Commission will report on its findings and its recommendations in the autumn, which will be directed at a range of stakeholders in the borough and at London and also at national level. We've committed to implementing the recommendations of this commission in full. As an employer, the council has also commissioned a significant piece of work with its workforce and also the leadership teams to ensure that we are responsive and alert to the barriers faced by our workforce, ensuring that we remove those barriers for talented individuals who come forward and who represent the community we serve. The lived experiences of our staff, our councillors, will ensure that we continue to provide services that meet the needs of residents, tackle the issues that they are experiencing, and ensure that our support reaches those who are most vulnerable in our society, releasing the potential of our great borough. There have been several meetings being held so far, ranging from all the areas that I've listed already. So we've had the Commission meet about health and housing with the Director of Public Health for London, Professor Kevin Fenton. We've also had one on crime and justice where they quizzed the Borough Commander. Income and employment had several representatives also from Heathrow and other local employers. And the education and young people meeting had several school leaders. So, Mr. Mayor, there's much more to do on tackling racism and discrimination, but we are fundamentally committed to having difficult conversations that we might need to have in order to get this right.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Rai, you can ask question.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Raza. Would you be able to comment on the recent announcement that the leader is nominating Vakaya Salka for the Freedom of the Borough? Could you hear me?
Racism is abhorrent and has no place in our society, and the behaviour of those individuals shamed us as a country. Would the portfolio holder join me in welcoming the announcement by the Prime Minister that people who post those racist slurs on social media will be banned from going to future football matches?
I actually welcome that because I think that the absolute abhorrent tsunami of hate that was online, literally just as those young people who were playing for the national team and doing so well and had actually brought so many people with them on this journey, like myself, who's not particularly into football, but I was absolutely glued to the telly every time they played. So I really welcome that there's something concrete being done about that.
Thank you, Councillor. The next one is Councillor Malcolm to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to the CPZ style consultation concerning LTNs, lots of people reported not receiving the consultation forms that the council were distributing in the areas. At least 22 streets I can see from residents who commented to myself. When you were informed of this, what did you do? What actions did you take?
Thanks, Councillor Malcolm, but I think you're a bit behind on this. So I did have one Ealing contact me, actually in a public meeting that we had about the consultation a week or two ago. And they had heard a few people had perhaps not got their leaflet. So they talked to me about that, and I've been in discussions with them. I've been able to reassure One Ealing that we did use a delivery company for the CPZ style consultation, and they have GPS tracking that shows every road that they've delivered to. So we have that GPS tracking, and we're absolutely assured that all roads in the LTN areas and in the boundary roads have been delivered to. Now, if any particular property was inaccessible, and sometimes they are, many of us in this room have door knocked, and we know sometimes there's properties that are inaccessible, the delivery company then sends them the leaflet by Royal Mail. So they are all sent the leaflet. Now, as I said, though, I have been speaking to One Ealing, and I've said to them, if you've got any specific properties in those roads, then do let us know, and we're happy to send out an additional leaflet to any of those properties. I am still awaiting any specific addresses, but if Councillor Malcolm has a specific address, please could he let me know, and we will do that. But of course, you know, we have put all of the information on our website, so you don't need the leaflet. The leaflet is a prompt. You can go on our website, and that's where the actual survey is. It's on the website. We've also done a press release. We put loads of stuff up on Twitter and social media, and we've done videos reminding people about the consultation. And, you know, I think it's highly unlikely that there is anybody in Ealing who lives in an LTN area who doesn't know about this consultation. It's even been on the national news. And as I say, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see from the turnout whether people know about this or not. If there's any roads, when we analyse that it looks like nobody got the leaflet, then that will flag up straight away. But, you know, I am 100% certain that we have leafleted all of the roads. We have the GPS tracking to prove that. But, you know, I would say to Councillor Malcolm on this, that, you know, we're talking about...
Time, please.
We're talking about active travel and taking action on climate change. And again, we're finding the Liberal Democrats are just two-faced and opportunistic on this issue. Everything we try to do around active travel, you guys come out against. And I have to say, you're going to get found out eventually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm, do you have supplementary?
There you are. Okay, you were at Cabinet as well recently, and one of the items there was a transport-related scheme which I supported, and that related to cycling. So that's where the council needs to move, not LTNs. Can I ask on the LTNs, portfolio holder outline whether the decision to retain or remove each LTN will be based on a simple majority of the consultation responses in each LTN area, and will you make sure that you don't do any salami slicing, which is the fear of some residents, given that when that has been done with CPZs in the past, that's often caused negativity and negative results.
Councillor Malcolm, I think all I can recall about yourself and cycle schemes is your constant opposition to our cycle scheme on Fisher's Lane, and that's what sticks in my memory. So, you know, it'd be really great to get your support on some of these initiatives, rather than, like I say, this sort of two-faced approach that we get from the Lib Dems all of the time. In terms of the consultation, I think I've answered the question earlier. We will be analysing the results. We expect that it will take a few weeks to analyse them. We will be looking at people who live directly within the LTN area and also people who live on the boundary roads, and of course the impact on people who don't live in either of those but perhaps use the LTNs for work or for whatever reason. So we will be looking at people in all of those groups, and we will be coming to a decision based on that. I think, you know, if Councillor Malcolm and others can hang on for another couple of weeks, then we can let the people speak and stop trying to speak for them. That's what Ealing Labour is about. And we will wait till the consultation comes through and we've got the results and we can listen to what people have to say.
Councillor Gordon will ask a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder update us on the School Streets programme, please?
Thanks, Councillor Gordon. So the School Streets programme has been about creating safe routes to school for school kids, for parents and carers, and for staff. So that, again, we can get people out of cars and get them to walk, to scoot, and to cycle to school. And they have actually been a really great success. We have had 12 of them as experimental school streets, and I'm delighted that just this week, we have agreed to make 10 of those schemes permanent, and we'll be just doing a bit of redesigning on the other 2 with the hope that we can bring them forward as well. They have been really, really excellent examples of how to do active travel, how to get people behind. We worked really closely with the schools, and the schools themselves have included, you know, safety training and what active travel is all about on the curriculum in the schools. They've also provided the volunteers to hold up the barriers in the morning and in the afternoon. What we have done in making them permanent is that we have now brought in ANPR, so it means that the school no longer have to provide staff or volunteers to help, so we've got ANPR, and we've also made some changes so that blue badge holders can be recognised and can apply for an exemption to go through. Like I say, we have had, you know, really, really great support from the schools and from, you know, parents and carers. And there's a couple of really brilliant independent analysis of the schemes that I would recommend everyone has a look at, because one of the things it really shows is it has absolutely improved the number of people who cycle or walk to school, and it's also improved safety on those streets. And so I'll just finish by saying a huge thank you to all of the volunteers who've been part of the trial, but you can stand down now. We've got the cameras out, they're now permanent, and looking forward to lots more scooting, walking, running to school. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, Councillor Rooney to Councillor Blacker. Councillor Rooney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday, the government announced they had opened up and removed restrictions put in place to control the spread of COVID-19. Can the portfolio holder comment on this recklessness in the face of a rapidly spreading Delta variant?
Councillor Blacker. Councillor Costigan, I think you need to switch off your mic.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Rooney. Mr. Mayor, we're at a really crucial point right now in our response to the virus, and it is alarming to see that the government are still failing to follow the evidence. We want to see restrictions dropped. I think we all do, but we want them dropped for good. And signs right now point to another wave of COVID-19 infections and subsequent lockdowns or restrictions. Ealing currently has a weekly rate of 313 cases per 100,000 people, with over 1,000 residents testing positive in the last week. That's alarmingly similar to the rate seen in early February. That rate is expected to continue to rise rapidly in London over the next few weeks. And although we're not yet seeing large numbers in Ealing, the number of people needing to be admitted to hospital for COVID-related reasons is increasing in London. COVID's not a pleasant illness, and long COVID can continue to impact people long after they were infected. Opening up too soon puts more of our residents at risk, and I'm simply not prepared to accept that. As a council, we're following the evidence, and we continue to have a cautious, careful, and common sense approach through this phase of the pandemic based on risk. We're continuing with COVID secure measures, including the expectation that staff and residents will continue to use face coverings and social distancing when accessing council services.
Councillor Rooney, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Blacker. What advice does the portfolio holder have for Ealing residents at this stage of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, well, I'd urge people to continue following social distancing guidelines and remember that it's the government who have yet again set us up to fail by not following the science. So my advice is the same as the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan's: carry on being cautious and wearing a mask both on public transport and in crowded spaces. Our communications are focused on encouraging and supporting residents to protect themselves and their communities, including promotion of hands, face, space and fresh air messages, testing, self-isolation and taking up the offer of vaccinations. We're asking businesses to take sensible precautions to protect both their staff and their customers. For the Delta variant, the second dose of the COVID vaccination gives much more additional protection than for other variants. So it is important that all residents take up the offer and have both of their vaccine doses. I've had both of mine because it's the best way to protect myself and the people I care about. There are additional pop-ups this weekend and over the next few days in Acton, so people have more chances to get their doses. What we do now will have a big impact on the position we're in next month. So please get your vaccine and continue to take whatever precautions you can.
For a second supplementary, Councillor Young to Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Professor Whitty said on the 5th of July that there is an advantage to opening up now in the summer months compared to the autumn when schools and colleges will be going back, and when the NHS will be under greater pressure. Given that in the last 4 weeks, reported by the ONS, 5 out of the 153 deaths in the borough were due to COVID, when over the same period there were 3,306 confirmed cases of COVID in Ealing. Would the portfolio holder please say why the Chief Medical Officer is wrong and when he thinks we should open up instead?
Thank you, Mayor. I think, we can listen to a range of experts, but we have to remember that the impact of COVID is not just on death figures for deaths. It is those who suffer in hospital for many days, weeks, and months in some cases. We have to look at the impact on staffing in businesses, and there is no point in opening up and saying, go out and spend your money in businesses if those businesses have to close because their staff are at home isolating because they've come into contact with a case. So he can be a lockdown skeptic. He can put more residents at risk, but it's not a risk I'm willing to take for our residents.
Thank you. The next question, Councillor Steed to Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How does the portfolio holder reconcile the closing of Stirling Road Recycling Centre in Acton with the council's response to the climate change emergency?
Thanks, Councillor Steed. And like I said, we're an open and transparent administration. So the truth is that the Acton tip is underused. It's quite small, and it didn't actually provide a lot of the service that residents needed. And so what we're now doing is residents can use the Twyford Abbey Road site because we're part of the West London Waste Alliance, so people can go there, and actually it's a better offer at that site because it does offer DIY drop-off, for example, which Acton didn't, and there is also the option to go to Greenford, which I actually visited today in the boiling heat, which was a great day to be around lots of rubbish, I must say, very lovely smells. So I must just say to Councillor Steed that most boroughs only have one such site. So we were actually quite an outlier in London, having more than one. And in fact, in terms of your question, driving to the tip is not something that helps with climate change. It is much better if people use our curbside collection and actually we get it all collected across the borough. We offer, fortnightly collections. We've got great wheelie bins, which my colleague, Councillor Bassam Mahfouz, was part of rolling out. I love mine. And we have a bulky waste collection. And we're also bringing in textile and small electrical items recycling as well. well. So it's much better if residents actually use that approach. But like I say, they can go to those 2 other sites. We do also have our climate and ecological emergency strategy, which I hope that you have read, because in that you will find out everything that we're doing around climate change. But I should just point out that actually one of the reasons that we've had to do this is because of 11 years of austerity, which you know, Councillor Steed, your party was part and parcel of kicking off when you got into bed with the Conservatives for your own naked political ambition. And as a result of that, we just can't afford 2 centres in this borough when we've lost 64p in the pound in our funding, and we have a social care crisis which this government is refusing to fund, and we have vulnerable people at risk. So in that context, we've had to close this tip, but I'm delighted to say we've got a bigger and better offer in other centres. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steed, you have a supplementary? Switch on your mic then.
Here we go. Well, I'm delighted that the portfolio holder is absolutely determined to use up her full-time allocation in answering the question. And managed to, surprise, surprise, involve blaming previous governments for however tenuous that link may be. No doubt the link is partly due to the 1.2 million alleged payment they're getting for selling of the site. I have to take up just a couple of points, if I may. I don't know why historically Ealing are not proud of the fact, but they had more than one site. You seem to regard that it's de rigueur, that actually you have to follow all other councils having just the one site. But the question is, Councillor Mahfouz, the man who brought in the lovely wiggly bins, yeah, indeed, but it's not going up anymore, is it? All research indicates that
Councillors, can you let the councillor speak, please?
Absolutely. All research indicates that to increase recycling, and Councillor Mahfouz must know this because he told us about it enough times, one has to make it easy for residents to recycle, to participate in the process. Closing Stirling Road does not make it easier for residents. Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, let the councillor speak, otherwise we will have to spend more time here, please. He is coming to the question now.
I am. Can she provide an answer to the question, why, when all research indicates you need to make it easier for people to participate, you're making the people living in all the boroughs in the southeast of the borough more difficult to recycle?
Thank you. Councillor Costigan.
God, I'm glad we got there eventually. It's a long, hot night by the looks of it tonight. So, Councillor Steed, we are making it easier for people to recycle. Like I say, I was at the tip in Greenford this morning with the leader, and I actually went there to talk about the rollout of our food recycling. And what we're doing is we're extending food recycling now to 20,000 flats in the borough, so they are going to be able to recycle their food. And we're also going round street by street to areas where people aren't participating in the food waste, and we're dropping a leaflet off explaining how they recycle their food waste, and we're also giving people free caddies and a free bin for outside the door so that they understand how to do this. That is how we are getting people to increase their recycling in the borough. And like I say, we have got lots of more plans for increasing our curbside collection on textiles and on electrical items. We are doing the work we need to do to make sure that our recycling rate not only is the second best in London, which it currently is, but will soon be, I am sure, the best in London. Thank you, Councillor Steed.
Councillor Jammu will ask the second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My second supplementary to Councillor Costigan is I'd like to know what measures are this council taking to tackle the climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jammu. I'm actually pretty sure that you know the answer to the question, because I know that you have had a look at, because you mentioned it to me the other day, our climate and ecological emergency strategy. It's quite clear that Councillor Steed and potentially others on the other side of the room haven't read that, which is a terrible pity, because we wrote that not only with the help of members from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who sat around at a meeting and put lots of post-its on the wall about what we needed to do to combat the climate crisis, but also we worked with our comrades in Act for Ealing and in many of the other organisations in the borough to come together and to come up with what I think is an excellent strategy, and which has key focuses on travel, which is why we're so big on active transport, on energy and heating people's homes, on food, and also on waste, which we've just been talking about. So that is our blueprint for how we attack the climate crisis. And I would ask everybody who hasn't read it, I'm looking at the people who keep asking these questions, to have a read of it, and you might learn something. Thank you, Councillor Jammeh.
Thank you. The next question, Councillor Kumar to Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When will the administration announce its plans for Gurnell Leisure Centre?
Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. As councillors know, the previous scheme for comprehensive regeneration of this site didn't get planning permission. So the centre is currently in limbo. Meanwhile, part of the site is being used as a key COVID testing site for the north of our borough. But we know that local people want to see a leisure centre at Gurnell, and so do we. But unfortunately, it's not as easy as a lick of paint. Councillor Mason visited the site today to see how much work needs to be done, and it's really quite extensive. We've been told by an independent assessor that to fully refurbish the building and extend the life of Gurnell Leisure Centre would cost in the region of £18 million. That's a huge amount of money to find after more than a decade of Tory austerity that's seen the government cut our budget by 64% since 2010. And it would also need to be closed for several years for that refurbishment to take place. It's our intention to bring modern swimming and sports facilities back to Gurnell, but it will take some time to put plans together to make this happen. Mr. Mayor, I want to assure local people that the council is invested in Gurnell's future too. And as soon as we know what's achievable on site, we'll be bringing forward plans for the local community.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar, you have supplementary?
Yes,
please.
I do, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks. So will the administration reopen the centre while we're waiting for you to make up your mind?
Councillor Kumar, I don't think you listened to my answer. To actually bring that centre back into use would take several years and £18 million. So no, we can't just reopen the centre with putting a lick of paint on the front door. It is extensive repairs. The centre has reached the end of its natural sort of life. It either needs a major refurbishment, which is a very high bill to pay, which will take several years, or we need to have a new one there instead. So we are looking at all our options, but please listen to the answer before you ask your supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor. Let me carry on. Councillor Dadwal will ask second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can the portfolio holder tell us what engagement has taken place with campaign groups like Save Gurnell?
Thank you, Councillor Dadwal. Mr. Mayor, this is an important question. We've pledged that openness and inclusivity and transparency will be the heart of everything we do. And that means meeting with campaign groups across the borough. Councillor Mason and I met with Save Gurnell campaigners to talk to them about what they'd like to see on the site and to give them an insight into the position we're in. We're going to continue to have an open door policy for everyone invested in the future of Gurnell. We know that not everyone will agree all the time, and I'm hopeful that we can find a compromise and deliver a leisure centre on site that everyone can enjoy. And I would say that Save Gurnell were not satisfied, but understood clearly the council's position and were willing to work with us to actually deliver a top of the range leisure centre if we can. But we are going to look at all the options. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, Councillor Anjum to Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you. Last week, the cabinet approved funding to plug the gap created by the government and ensure over 3,000 children didn't go hungry this summer. What further plans are there to support children over the summer period holidays?
Mr. Mayor, I'm really pleased to say that Ealing Council has coordinated a full summer holiday activities and food programme to provide free holiday activities for school-age children from reception to year 11 who are in receipt of benefit-related free school meals. Over 10,000 pupils are eligible to benefit from the programme, which runs from the 26th of July to the 27th of August this year. All over the borough, there are now over 50 holiday activity providers offering a range of free activities as well as a healthy meal. In addition to this programme, the majority of our secondary schools are offering Year 6 summer school programmes to support transition to Year 7. The Youth Service will also be delivering the holiday activity programme out of the Bollow Youth Centre, Westside and the Yap. These programmes will run on average 3 days a week from 12 to 4 p.m.
Councillor Anjum, you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Can the portfolio holder shed some light on the government approach to free school meals, please?
Councillor Nagpal.
To be blunt, Mr. Mayor, the government have failed to fund school meals yet again. Last time the government decided that feeding children wasn't a priority, it took a top football player, the wonderful Marcus Rashford, and the Labour Party to put enough pressure on the government to do the decent thing and pay up for school meals. Now, heading into summer, with lockdown lifting and furlough coming to an end, Ealing has the 4th highest number of people on in-work benefits in the country. Furlough's coming to an end and people are going hungry. Honestly, I was amazed that the government still thinks it's acceptable to allow children to go hungry over school holidays. The Ealing Labour stepped in and we committed £250,000 to plug the gap and feed over 3,000 children this summer.
Thank you. Councillor Young will ask second supplementary.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Yes, Keith, I can hear you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
Councillors, can you take your seats? We are going to start the meeting again. Okay, welcome back, councillors. Our system is up and running, and I'm going to move straight to item 10A on the agenda, Council Plan 2021-22 and year-end 2021 performance monitoring. Before I start that, I have received a request to suspend procedure rule 14.5 to allow 7 minutes to propose and 6 minutes to the other leaders, and that was agreed by the council. So I'm going to go straight to Councillor Peter Mason and ask him to make the recommendation to the report. Councillor Peter Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None of us could have possibly anticipated where we would find ourselves today. When we set out the challenges we thought that we would face in 2018, none of us could have anticipated the ones that we face now. We talked of broken markets, of private companies delivering public services increasingly unable to make it work. We spoke of pressures of a society growing older, of family breakup requiring more of our care and attention. We spoke of Brexit, of huge concerns over the supply of labour and of goods now coming true. And we spoke of austerity, of losing 64 pence in every pound since 2010. We now have COVID-19. And as we emerge from a public health crisis, we are straight back into a climate crisis. And with the world growing more interdependent and bigger, it's also shrunk. And as police brutality 4,000 miles away make us have to face up to some stark realities of institutional racism and structural inequality right here at home. And therefore our tasks ahead are even clearer, of creating good jobs in the context of a borough with the second highest rate of furlough, the fourth highest in-work benefits, and an airport and its supply chain brought to its knees. Of the climate crisis, the biggest challenge that we have faced as a species, of conflict fueled no longer just by nationalism and oil, but of access to water, of endangered species, rising temperatures, of extreme weather, food shortages, of pollution-saturated air, and of tackling inequality, having to face up to the hard and honest conversations that we know that we need to have. The fact that in Southall Green, your average income will be around 16,000, whilst in Southfields, your average income will be of 40,000. The fact that if you are an Asian woman living in Norwood Green, you will live on average 15 years less than you will as a woman in Northfields. And of black families, representing 10% of our borough, but a third of our tenants and those on our housing waiting lists. Their children disproportionately excluded from school and facing some of the toughest challenges to access a great education. Ealing deserves better than a council that has to manage decline, forced by diminishing budgets imposed on us by central government, whilst they increase our responsibilities. Delivering great public services isn't the limit of our ambition. We are more than simply managers of services. We're about maximising the good that we can do to deliver change for the people of Ealing, of climate action, of decent living incomes, of an inclusive economy, of genuinely affordable homes, of good growth, of thriving communities, of a fairer start for our children, of tackling inequality, and of healthy lives. We have to rethink in a post-pandemic world what this all means for Ealing. When the marketeers were selling the queen of the suburbs to the upwardly mobile middle classes of Victorian London, they also proclaimed, why go to town? Our 21st century challenge is to build a sustainable economy, not of a dormitory town. It cannot be the right that the future of our borough is one in which rich people get on Crossrail to their central office jobs and poor people catch the 207 and the 94 to clean them. Our future must be one that brings good jobs back to our borough, that strengthens the identity of our 7 towns, from the tree-lined streets of central Ealing, to the industrial heritage and heartlands of Southall, to the green fields of Hanwell and the Brent Valley. Neighbourhoods that spent so much of our time in and have come to love that little bit more because of it. Where we enjoyed our parks and green spaces.
They're all going out. I know he's starting to go to that's music.
Linda Burke, your mic is on. Can you switch it off, please?
Who was that? Who was that?
You can carry on.
Where we, I certainly heard Councillor Stafford in there too. Where we've enjoyed our parks and green spaces and our local parades and our high streets and come to miss so many of the community gatherings, networks of neighbourhoods and friends and family. But we can and we should be inspired by the resilience shown by the community at the height of the pandemic, coming together in a million acts of loving kindness, looking out for one another as neighbours, as strangers. Some of our proudest achievements as a council are ones in which we have worked together with the community, of saving Ealing Hospital and of protecting the rights of women at Mattock Lane. Communities have come together through mutual aid groups, through Lagercan, through our community-run libraries, through our community land trust, reflecting the desire of communities to be in control of their futures. Local government, born from the turn of the century paternalism, patrician and patriarchal, too often has done things to people rather than doing things with people. Our focus has to be on empowering those who have the least amount of power in society and listening to every voice, and not just those who have the time and the inclination and the resources to advocate and articulate their views with the most force, but of building consent for change from all parts of our community and our borough, not only by bringing people on board with the decisions that we take, but we need to understand more deeply their needs first and foremost. Meeting people where they are, knocking on their doors, going to their community centres and making it our responsibility to lean in, even in the most difficult of conversations, to find the compromises that we need to make in order to build a good society. Open, transparent, inclusive. We as councillors disagree about so much, but we all want to change Ealing for the better, despite having different ideas about how we get there. Ultimately, we are trying to build a fairer, greener, and more equal Ealing, where our families have good jobs, genuinely affordable homes, in strong and resilient communities who live long lives of good health, with a chance for their next generation to have the same. And on that, Mr. Mayor, I move our council plan.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Costigan to speak for 4 minutes and second the motion? Move.
Mr. Mayor, these days I think of life as before COVID and after. Before COVID, the council took climate change quite seriously. Like many boroughs, we declared a climate emergency in 2019. But back then, I'm not sure anyone really understood what the word emergency meant. And then COVID changed everything. We saw thousands of people dying, and we knew what that felt like. But if we don't take action, the same will happen with deaths from floods, increasing hot weather, and air pollution. We saw what panic buying looked like. But if we don't take action, the same will happen when drought and famine cause shortages in this country. Mr. Mayor, over the last year, we've finally seen what an emergency really means. This country wasn't prepared for COVID. We now know the Conservative government hadn't updated their pandemic emergency plan for years. But Ealing Labour is preparing now for the climate emergency. This is why we have decided it's time for a reset. We want to refocus the council on our 3 key goals of creating good jobs, fighting inequality, and yes, tackling climate change. We've already done a lot. We recycle about half of our waste, the second best in London. Almost none of it goes to landfill. We've introduced low traffic neighbourhoods and temporary cycleways to encourage active travel. And we've planted 37,000 trees since 2018, more than the 30,000 we promised and delivered a year early. But our new council plan significantly ramps up our ambition on tackling climate change. We're rolling out food waste collections to 20,000 flats over the next few months. We want to start collecting small electrical items and textiles from the curbside. And we're working with West London Waste on some very exciting ideas for a circular economy site in Ealing that could include ideas like a library of things, or a repair workshop, or a zero waste cafe or bar. I definitely prefer the bar option, Mr. Mayor. We're expanding emissions-based parking charges to pay and display to tackle air pollution. We're retrofitting 68 homes on the Trees Estate in South Ealing with solar panels and air heat pumps to cut down on carbon emissions. We plan to turn some of our underused golf courses into parks, rewilding our borough to mitigate air pollution. And there will be even more trees. On active travel, we're consulting on a new cycle route on the Uxbridge Road, and we've further plans for a cycle route on Greenford Road. And just this week, we agreed to make 10 school streets permanent, including one at Willow Tree School in my own ward in Northolt. We're also working with Act for Ealing to come up with a range of initiatives to enthuse local schools and residents in the run-up to the COP26 conference in Glasgow. But crucially, we want to do all of this with people, not to people. That's because we're an open, transparent, and inclusive administration. So we're consulting residents on whether or not they want their low traffic neighbourhoods. And we're planning to work much more closely with the local people and businesses on how we radically expand our climate change agenda. Mr. Mayor, we all know we're in the middle of a public health emergency, but it turns out Boris Johnson thinks it doesn't matter because the people dying are all over 80. So I guess it's not surprising he's not big on the climate emergency either. I had to write to the government this week because ridiculously, they insist on charging people 20% VAT to make green home improvements. They've literally made it cheaper to knock down buildings and start again. Earlier this year, they got rid of the Green Homes Grant. And where is the scrappage scheme we desperately need to phase out polluting cars? Just like the COVID crisis, the Tories don't have a plan. So once again, where this government has abjectly failed, Ealing Labour is stepping in with a new radical agenda for our borough and our planet. I second.
Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's worth remembering that the last time we debated the council plan, 100% of the Labour Party voted in favour of it. And yet in May of this year, more than 50% of them reneged on that vote. They voted to get rid of their leadership, replace it with a totally new leadership. So severe was the cull that only 2 of the then cabinet survived. I see Councillor Mason as the Robespierre of Ealing, as the left-wing radical who got rid of the ancien regime. And as a left-wing radical, of course, he would complain about austerity, but failed to mention Gordon Brown's part in bringing that about. He mentioned the reduction in funding up to 2 years ago, but fails to mention that in the last 2 years, there's been a 13% increase in core spending power for this council. I did listen to his speech tonight, but also to his presentation the other day at our Review and Scrutiny Committee, where he outlined the 3 priorities. I presume these were to replace the previous motto, which appeared to be Labour isn't listening, with the 3 priorities of rebuilding the economy and trying to improve the number of jobs in the borough, greening the borough, which includes keeping our air quality good and clean, and tackling poverty and inequality, and anything which blights the lives of residents. And I was trying to think of a policy which would affect all 3 of those. And then it came to me. You're there, LTNs, they damage businesses. They cause air pollution, and they certainly blight the lives of many of our residents. They're very noble, these priorities, but the test will be what happens when it comes to the crunch on LTNs. We've had emails from builders who say it isn't worth going to do a small job because it takes so long to get there that it isn't worth the trouble it takes. We've had emails from people who've set up small businesses at home, who've gone bust because people can't get to their home to pick up the goods. It doesn't take a genius to realize that if you double journey times, you're going to double pollution. Let's be quite clear, LTNs cause pollution, don't help to save it. And the email that really got to me was the poor lady who's a breast cancer sufferer, who couldn't get through the LTNs to her hospital appointment because of the congestion that they caused. It's quite clear that the way out of the problem with the air quality is electric vehicles, not adding extra congestion to the routes. Now, the consultation, I can't understand Councillor Costigan, who says that we're against consultation. We heard that Councillor Mason say in the first week after he was elected that he would undertake a CPZ-type consultation in the LTNs, but nothing happened until after we put down a motion at the last council meeting calling for that consultation to take place. We shamed you into doing it. But when we have got the consultation is extremely short, little more than 3 weeks, and very biased. The leaflets that go out seem to think the LTNs are the best thing in the world, but the truth is they damage and they blight lives. What we want to know is whether the August expiry date of the ETOs will be extended, come what may. The Cabinet meeting in September, when these matters are going to be discussed and considered. We want to know whether the Labour Party will honour the pledges given by their ward councillors to say that if a majority of people in the LTNs vote against them, that they will scrap the LTNs. We want to know whether commonplace will be taken into account and whether the statutory consultation on the ETOs, the responses have gone into the borough traffic order, the borough engineer, and will be taken into account. I was very worried when Councillor Costigan refused to answer the question about whether the whole vote would be taken into account. There wouldn't be subdividing of the vote to try to engineer some sort of retention of LTNs. We did see, that, however, that they are going to be the final vote. We're not going to have another one. And it's not going to be a case of going back again and again and again until they get the answer they want. Well, the answer is quite clear from commonplace, what the people want. And Councillor Costigan sounds as though she still likes LTNs. She says that it's visitors, people from outside the borough, who pick up most of the tickets. Well, they're so confusing, the signs. It's not surprising if you're not familiar with the area, particularly if it's dark, you pick up a ticket. Quite a lot of people in my ward have picked up tickets because they just didn't understand the system. It is not clear. They're being trapped. It's a big problem at night. It's a big problem from equality's point of view. If you're a lady being taken home by a taxi, you don't want to be dropped half a mile away from your door because the taxi driver refuses to go into the LTNs. There's one thing you can do tonight, and that is to improve the quality of life for the people of the borough. That is to promise that if the vote goes against the LTNs, you will take them out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Young, can you switch off your mic, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, probably the most important issues that happened over the year is detailed quite well on page 33. I would have to credit the council for a lot of its work, that it's done on COVID. It's a tremendous amount of extra upheaval that officers have had to deal with over the past year and more than that now. And in many of those areas, they've done a really good job. Many people have lost their lives, been ill, and are still suffering the negatives of COVID. And all of us in this room are having issues with civil liberties where we have to wear masks, or should we not wear masks? And I think at the beginning of the meeting, that was detailed as well. I think one area recently when I was on Churchfield Road in Acton, a number of the businesses there felt the council could have made the payments that were due to them via the government through the council were not made fast enough. And there were two businesses, one who got their receipt of their business amounts of money just in time and survived, and the other one didn't. And I do think that if there is any way to speed up processes where the council is paying money to businesses in these situations, we need to do as best we can to do that. And I know it's not a simple situation. But I think that the first comment I would make about the report is that people want to be heard. And I know on LTNs there has been a change of policy which has been welcomed, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But I think the council for many years actually has ignored an opportunity that it had. It's got a contact centre, tens of thousands of email addresses. When we all sign up to different schemes with the council, or we're a customer or a user, we should get stuff back from the council about information that what the council is doing, about that we're consulted about particular issues, about things in my ward, things near my park, things in my area. And I don't think the council is thinking strong enough in those areas, because I think that will bring more people into what the council is doing and a greater understanding of people and their communities. I think on planning as well, we've seen a lot of huge numbers of people, whether it's hundreds or thousands of people against many schemes around the borough we've seen. And part of that is that the scheme is not set up to help residents fully, but the council can do a lot more. And I think one thing the council needs to do now is to update its local plan. I know it's been talked about for so long, but it's not happened. And that's allowed some, in my view, poor developments to take place with little compensation in the background for many of those people who will suffer some of the consequences of that. And so on planning and housing, we do need more carbon neutral buildings. And I've said this a couple of times in Cabinet, that we've signed up with other councils and across London with the Mayor of London to only accept a small amount of money from developers who are not building a carbon neutral building. We should be saying we should go on our own and we should be charging the full amount, so that if you want to develop in our borough and you want to build that affordable housing, you can do so, but you have to make that building carbon neutral or give us the full amount of money so we can do that. At the moment, we only get a third of what we need, and that doesn't fund what we need, therefore, to become carbon neutral. So we're actually setting ourselves up to fail on that. Other areas, I know Councillor Costigan talks about trees, which a good point. Why don't we just force developers, for every unit that they put forward and we agree to, they should be planting X number of trees. That will help the environment, and we may get more affordable housing at the same time. And then other areas where I think the council has failed, and some of this is down to the management in the past and now, is about cleaning up Ealing. Ealing is less clean than it needs to be. It should be so much better than it was. When Amy was here, it was absolutely awful, and it should be so much better than it is now. And now we've got gel. We should be in a much better situation. There are too many missed collections, and I think there is still management issues about that. We've got trees that are not pruned. You've got officers who are having to discuss with contractors who are complaining at residents. And all of these arguments mean these trees are not being pruned. And you go anywhere in central Ealing or Acton or Southfield, and many of these trees, you just can't get past if you've got a pram or a wheelchair on many of these streets. And the officers are struggling to deal with that. And we need a tough management regime to work with some of these contractors, and they need to do the job that they're paid to do. I think Councillor Steed on recycling made the point very eloquently, where he said you need to make it easier for people to recycle. And some of that is services should be free when sometimes they're not, or they should be cheaper. Because at the moment, the bulky scheme was changed. It's one of the most expensive in the area. And it's no wonder sometimes we have huge amounts of fly tipping. The officers even admitted when Acton closes in November, there will be incidents of fly tipping linked to that. And so that clearly is not the right approach. If we look at recycling rates, it's great that we're at the 50% level, but we should be at 60%. That might be your new target, but we've been at 50% for I think 4 or 5 years now. And you know, why have we not increased from 50 to 55 or 60 at this time? And then lastly, I'll just mention about the sort of, it's not been mentioned yet, about the fear of crime or actual crime levels. When the dimming took place of the lights in 2016, there wasn't a consultation on it. And that was one of the problems because people didn't know what was going to happen to them. And there has been an increase in crime. When we did a survey, a woman's safety survey a couple of months ago, because of a number of deaths that were in the news.
Time, Councillor.
I will wind up shortly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It came out that the dimming of lights was actually a very crucial issue in the sort of 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Time. And therefore, we need to look at whether that policy is the right area. So I would say there are so many areas the council needs to look at and improve. And Liberal Democrats say Ealing deserves better than what we're getting at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Mahfouz.
First of all, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to wish you and other colleagues Eid Mubarak for this evening. Mr. Mayor, as a Labour administration, we are setting out this evening how we are being an open, inclusive and transparent council, as we do so on 3 key plinths to deliver for our residents. We stand for creating good jobs, we stand for tackling the climate crisis, and we stand for fighting inequality. Before I go on, Mr. Mayor, as much as it sounds, listening to the opposition, that the Ealing Comedy Festival has actually opened this evening, we were the swiftest payers of business grants in the country. Is that not fast enough for you, Councillor Malcolm? But I want to be really clear before we carry on with the rest of the debate that anyone who votes against this plan is voting against the priorities that I have just outlined. And by doing so, they ignore the will of the people in our borough. As the council's new lead for decent living incomes, I'm clear that in the wake of the government's mishandling of the COVID crisis, the feedback I get on doorsteps and the unemployment and benefit claimant figures, which Councillor Mason has already referred to across our borough, that we are absolutely desperately need to deliver on this priority for the sake of our residents and their futures. So let's talk about those figures. The fallout of the government's failure on COVID is that Ealing and West London have been amongst the hardest hit areas when it comes to furlough and unemployment. The latest benefit claimant count is sitting at over 20,000 of our residents. And it has sat at that figure since June of last year. That's 2.5 times what it was before the pandemic. There are a further 20,000 people relying on furlough. Mr. Mayor, the numbers are staggering and our employment rate hovering around the 10% mark in the past 12 months. 1 in 10 adults out of work. But the saddest thing is, Mr. Mayor, that these aren't just numbers or statistics. These are mums, dads, grandparents, brothers, sisters, young people, all trying simply to earn a living. So, Mr. Mayor, my portfolio is to bring new and well-paid jobs back to our borough and secure a strong economic recovery where good businesses can thrive. So let me just talk about what we've done. Over the past year, we've carried out work through the West London Alliance and through Oxford Economics to understand the industries and the individuals that have been impacted by the COVID economic fallout. We've done the same to develop a strategy for a recovery that will focus our efforts and those of our delivery partners in the right areas and working with the right people. We've developed an Ealing Work West website as a hub of opportunity in the borough, offering residents a one-stop shop so that residents can search for employment and training opportunities on their doorsteps. We've set ourselves up to support those most in need. The Recovery Skills Group, which has already received funding to support vulnerable young people and families. In the last year alone, we have supported over 500 people get into work, and a further 1,688 people received a qualification. Over the last year, we worked with local businesses to create 139 apprenticeships, meaning that we have already surpassed our target for 750 apprenticeships in this administration's lifetime and we still have almost a year to go. Working with our local college and partners, we've developed a green skills offer with a range of travel, to support active travel, low carbon and environmental sustainability. And look, Mr. Mayor, I could go on, but going forward, we have already brought to Cabinet a report only last week to secure further funding to support additional Ealing residents to get them back into work. The work on strategies means that we can now target that support to those who most need it, those who have lost their lifelong jobs working or in or supporting the aviation industry, as we've heard, and many other industries as well. And we will do area-based interventions starting with Southall, where we've already built a partnership group, and we'll follow that on in Acton and Northolt and work with specific residents. And look, Mr. Mayor, we will launch our plan for jobs this autumn. Speaking to Elthorne residents, speaking to students at Elthorne High yesterday, they absolutely got it, Mr. Mayor. They absolutely got it. They told me they saw a good job as a means of providing self-worth and tackling the mental health pandemic that currently challenges our borough and our country. So, Mr. Mayor, our promise from Ealing Labour and anyone who supports this council plan this evening, from Northolt to Northfields, from Southall to South Acton, from Horsenden to Hanwell, this is what the Labour administration stands up for all of our residents and unites unrelentingly to create good jobs for our residents. So, Mr. Mayor, very simply, tonight, I will vote to create good jobs for our borough, to vote to tackle the climate crisis, and vote to fight inequality. And Mr. Mayor, I call on all members to do the same this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Can I ask Councillor Gulland to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank councillors and officers for writing this report and plan and making it available. I've certainly enjoyed reading it myself in detail, but I do wonder how many of our residents will read it. And this touches on the whole issue of resident engagement with the council, which I look forward to considering on Scrutiny Review Panel 4. I'd like to refer members to the outcome, A Fairer Start, on page 32 of the plan. I'm actually in agreement with the targets and strategies in this section. How could you not be? We all agree that Ealing children, our children, must all have access to the best education and molded to their needs. But you know, I see no mention here of music. Music has a vital role in society and education, but it's hardly offered at all at some Ealing schools. And we have a superb music hub in the borough. It's called Ealing Music Services, run with élan and imagination. This service delivers hundreds of hours of top-rate music tuition in schools and homes across the borough, and special programs for children with special educational needs. And we're now talking about providing careers advice for Ealing youngsters who want to follow music through to tertiary level and beyond. I refer colleagues to the good growth section, page 51 of the plan. Now, of course, I'm pleased that the council is taking steps to support business survival in these difficult times. I'll certainly be following the town development plans very carefully, and I note the omission of the little word Acton in this plan. I also note plans afoot to develop an Ealing Business Board or Forum, and that sounds good, but the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. The council, through its powers, can offer a really good service to businesses, provide and channel grants, businesses of different sizes and character, bring them together, introduce entrepreneurs to each other, and help businesses to connect to other businesses outside the borough. Will it? Moving on to thriving communities on page 55. Now, there are many encouraging ideas here, and I will personally support every effort to develop Ealing's cultural activity and develop audiences. But I do urge the council to prioritize speaking to individuals and groups that actually organize events. These are the people who put on superb concerts, plays, festivals, and exhibitions, but who've by definition also suffered failure, who know what it means to mount a production without the cushion of financial security. And finally, Mr. Mayor, could I speak up, please, for the fantastic people who keep the flame burning for our town twinning program, mostly through educational, cultural, and sporting exchange. Twinning is not mentioned in this plan, But does anyone here in this room imagine that our confrères in Marc-en-Barœul, Yellany, and Kreis Steinfurt are not considering exactly the same issues we have before us this evening? We could learn a great deal, Mr. Mayor, with a minimum of effort and a bit more imagination. Mr. Mayor, this plan has merits, but because of its omissions and imprecisions, I will not be voting for its adoption. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for timekeeping. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We find ourselves discussing a conundrum tonight. Is this a limited council plan update in year 4 of a tired administration? Or is this the first exciting glimpse of the new Mason administration under new management and completely unrelated to the discredited Bell administration? A lot of the content would suggest the former, trundling on, understandably, with similar approaches to the two biggest issues we have to face, the COVID pandemic and the climate crisis, but also constantly citing central government cuts to absolve themselves of responsibility for taking any spending decisions. But the rhetoric is very different. We see Councillor Mason in his white suit like a latter-day Martin Bell. He certainly has a very different style to Councillor Bell. And we have an enlarged cabinet with grandiose and indecipherable titles like decent living incomes, inclusive economy, and good growth, whatever that means. The plan includes new values of being trustworthy, innovative, collaborative, and accountable. But how accountable is it to hide who is responsible for what? How collaborative is it to structure portfolios around Labour Party targets rather than listening to residents? And on page after page, the section headed Our Strategic Priorities for 2021-22 bears an uncanny resemblance to what we have achieved in 2020-21 under the old regime. The dramatic sounding transformation targets often turn out to be ensured continued increase of some indicator or other, or reduce the achievement gap in another. The final item in the good growth strategy priority is to reopen a cinema in Ealing Broadway. That's fantastic. And that was a new policy when the late Councillor Rose proposed a CPO of the cinema site a decade or more ago. And it remains desirable, but it can scarcely be seen as a brave new policy for a brave new administration. And that's it, going through the plan, it's just page after page of the same old stuff with slightly different rhetoric. The only discernible change in reality, well, is it in reality, is a welcome new focus on inequalities. But again, there's precious little in the plan that says how that would be achieved. Is it actually any different? Is there actually anything in the plan which will make Ealing a more equal society, or is it more rhetoric? Clearly, there's a desire to be seen to be addressing this issue, and that's good. But will the administration walk the walk as well as talk the talk? In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, in terms of historical parallels, I won't go back as far as Robespierre, but I will go back to the Blair-Brown era. Gordon Brown spent years arguing with Tony Blair and the Parliamentary Labour Party was divided in bitter fighting between Blairites and Brownies. The public were fed up with Blair. Eventually Brown triumphed and was able to take over. But to those outside the Labour bubble, there was precious little discernible difference in what the government actually did. And Labour still lost their majority at the next election. We shall see whether that parallel holds next May.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Raza.
Firstly, Mr. Mayor, I would like to wish all my Muslim colleagues here tonight Eid Mubarak. We have chosen to be here to do this important work for the benefit of our borough instead of celebrating with our families and our friends tonight. Mr. Mayor, I'm speaking in favour of this council plan tonight as Ealing's first ever cabinet member for tackling inequalities. Inequality affects every aspect of our lives. It can stifle our dreams, It can stunt our ambitions, send us to sleep hungry, kill us earlier, make us feel safe, unsafe, ashamed, or unwelcome. I'm talking about the fact that we don't have a level playing field, that the world we live in can treat you very differently because of the color of your skin, your gender, your sexuality, or your religion. And yes, there are examples of people who are exceptional, who have achieved great things despite the world not really being on their side. People like Bukayo Saka, who went to school in my ward, Edward Beetham Church of England School, in Greenford Green. I'm really, really delighted that my colleague, Councillor Peter Mason, has formally nominated Saka for the Freedom of the Borough, making him the youngest recipient of this honour. He's a wonderful young man who's demonstrated on and off the pitch that he's a role model for children in Ealing. But we want to make sure that every single child in Ealing has the same opportunities in life, that nobody is held back, that everyone can access and support what they need to live a long, healthy and fulfilling life. Ealing Labour has taken a stand against inequality before. When we took control of this council in 2010, we joined forces with Sister Supporter to create the first ever safe zone around a sexual health clinic in the UK, enabling women to access legal healthcare safely without the trauma of having to undergo heckling, preaching, or intimidation by protesters outside. Last year, our response to the Black Lives Matter movement, inequalities that were brought into sharp focus by the COVID crisis, was to establish an independent race equality commission. That commission's work is still ongoing and being chaired by Lord Simon Woolley and supported by this council. I'm pleased to say that we've committed to taking on all its recommendations in full when the report reports back to us in the autumn. But we want to go further, and that's why you're listening to a speech by a cabinet member with the portfolio for tackling inequality this evening. We're going to be carrying out a review of the borough's public realm, street names, and to make sure that our built environment represents every community that lives in it. We want to work towards ending child poverty in Ealing by putting together a child poverty action plan, reducing child poverty by a third, and establishing an Ealing Violence Reduction Unit using a public health approach to preventing crime, working on supporting all our vulnerable communities. But there will be more to do. We're committed to being open, inclusive, and transparent as a council, and we know that there will be difficult conversations about fighting inequality and what we need to do as an organisation. Mr. Mayor, I'm very happy to be part of this council plan and to support our priorities for the next year of creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and fighting inequality, which is the golden thread which runs through everything this council does. I'm really proud to be focusing on the fight inequality in our borough, and I look forward to engaging with as many communities as possible that have made Ealing their home. I'm listening to everyone, and I'm endeavouring to level this playing field.
Councillor Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The pandemic has shone a light on our failures as a society. As we move into the post-pandemic age, we face huge challenges from inequality of opportunity, climate change, and economic recovery. In the Healthy Lives section of the report, there are a number of areas which I support, such as preparation for a challenging winter, working with NHS partners to support hospital discharges, and especially developing a discharge to assess model that I know has been successful in other boroughs. In addition, plans to tackle childhood obesity and improving oral health. And I look forward to seeing these progress sitting on Health Wellbeing Board and on Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Panel over the course of the year. However, there are a number of areas that I'm concerned that this plan just pays lip service to. And it's no wonder that after 11 years of Labour in Ealing, residents often feel that they aren't being listened to. The first of these areas is residents' concern over high-rise developments. For years, campaign groups, resident associations, and local people have been campaigning against the monster developments. All the strategy document states is that the review of the local plan will consider possible policy approaches. Kicking it into the long grass, no real action, and not really listening. On LTNs, the plan mentions the CPZ style consultation on whether they think the LTNs work, but no commitment that the administration will actually implement the outcome. We heard earlier from Councillor Costigan that they will make a decision, that residents will be in the driving seat, but once again, didn't commit in the response to Councillor Milliken's question that the administration will accept and implement the results. For other items in the plan, it states really clearly that reports will be implemented and delivered. The words are used throughout the document, but are missing when it comes to the LTN consultation. So why is it so evasive? Given that they've already ignored residents during the consultation on Commonplace, are the administration once again planning to ignore residents if they don't get the result that they want? We're all for consultation on this side. We believe that the results from the first consultation should have been listened to, and we hope that the administration will listen this time and implement them. The third area that I'm concerned about is regarding Southall Gasworks. For years, residents have been complaining about air quality concerns. But what does the strategy actually say? It says that it will establish a task force to oversee and review the council's position. Again, no hard, tangible action on addressing residents' concerns. So the council may have a new leader, but he was at the heart of the previous administration. And this plan is the same old Labour, showing they just aren't listening.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And firstly, may I associate myself with the condolences given to John Delaney's family and friends. The tributes this evening are a testament to the lasting impact he's had in Acton and Ealing, and he will be much missed. I'm incredibly proud to be a member of the Ealing Council Cabinet and to be supporting our ambitious new council plan. Our new priorities are to create good jobs, tackle the climate crisis and fight inequality. And I'm excited to hold a portfolio that is so important in the fight against inequality. As new Cabinet Member for Healthy Lives, and I'm sure Councillor Ball doesn't think that's just a Labour Party slogan, my first priority has been to get to grips with COVID-19 response and what we need to do to keep Ealing safe. The work that's been done by our public health staff and frontline NHS workers has been incredible. I'm amazed they are still going after a long year. But I was also shocked by some of the issues we faced. Members will remember that incredible day that we had to put out a public appeal for PPE because the government weren't supplying enough for us. Putting the politics to one side, I honestly thought that basic issues like that would be a teething problem, until we asked how many vaccines had been allocated to our borough. Ealing Labour pledged to run an open, inclusive and transparent council, so I want to be honest about the situation we are in. The NHS in Ealing has been set government targets that are literally impossible to reach. Ealing does not have enough vaccines to reach their target, and they supply the vaccines. We had pharmacy sites ready to go in Acton, and then one was delayed and the other has been lost in the national system. So they know we won't hit those targets. And yet we have restrictions lifted with 35% of residents yet to receive their first jab, let alone feel the benefits of both. I want to get on with the job of delivering the priorities laid out before you in this council plan. But thanks to the government and prematurely announcing an end to restrictions, I have to be honest and say that we could be facing more disruption. Across the country, pubs and shops are already having to cut hours because staff are falling ill or doing absolutely the right thing and isolating as a contact of someone else who has. Taking public health measures away was never about protecting the economy. We can't spend money in shops that don't have the staff to operate, but about protecting Johnson from his own backbenchers. So don't listen to the Tories on COVID. Listen to the doctors, nurses and scientists who are saying it's too soon. And please continue to take sensible precautions like wearing face coverings to keep Ealing safe. In the face of COVID over the last year, people in Ealing have risen to the challenge. But COVID has shone a light on long-term health inequalities between different communities, with people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups more likely to become seriously ill or die from COVID-19 and more likely to be working in essential frontline jobs responding to the pandemic. In 2021, women's life expectancies are shorter in Norwood Green than in Northfields. As the new Cabinet Member for Healthy Lives, my priority is to fight these health inequalities in our borough. So while we'll continue to operate services like the Ealing Together phone line and programmes like Better Lives, we're aiming to be more ambitious for the future. An integrated impact assessment will reveal how COVID has exacerbated existing inequalities, created new ones, and ask how we as a council can tackle them. I want to help the Ealing Care Co-op get off the ground and make an impact on a care market that too often doesn't care for its staff as well as it should. And the council plan also includes working to set up a council-owned company to provide affordable nursery and childcare by stripping out profit. And finally, I'll be looking forward to working with Councillor Annan to make sure Let's Go Southall is a success, building a resilient community, leading healthy lives. Mr. Mayor, it's clear that our borough faces challenges we never could have foreseen when the last council plan was written. But despite the impact on our council, we're ambitious for Ealing. I can't wait to get started working with residents and our NHS to change Ealing for the better. And I hope that next year we can go even further in creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and fighting inequality.
Can I ask Councillor Milliken to speak now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And can I just start by thanking Councillor Gallant for his maiden speech and Councillor Conti for his second maiden speech. So I'm sure they will both be very good servants to the people they represent in the borough. And something that Councillor Mahfouz reminded me, I should perhaps just declare an interest that I chair a social enterprise that has taken 2 apprentices as part of the government's Kickstart programme. Under the umbrella of Ealing Council. So I'm very pleased for that. So thanks for reminding me about that, Councillor Mahfouz. So Mr. Mayor, this plan starts by declaring its focus on tackling inequalities. Or to put it another way, as we relentlessly hear from our Prime Minister, we need to level up our society, which I think spells it out rather better. But whichever way you look at it, we want to level up, we want to tackle inequality. And education is one of the key ways that will level up our society. So I'm absolutely delighted that so many of our schools are good or outstanding. And I'm sure that right across the chamber, we can thank all of the teachers, teaching assistants, and indeed everyone that works in our schools for their hard work, particularly over the past 15 months. Now, I was somewhat surprised that the council seemed to be softening its approach to schools becoming academies. Apparently, on page 34 of the plan, the council is only monitoring that the Catholic schools might convert to academies rather than actively opposing it, which they've done in the past. I thought it was an article of faith that Labour councils didn't like academies as they didn't like losing control. Labour councils love control as they think they know best. But the great strength of academies is that they give heads the freedom to develop their schools and break away from local authority control to do the best for their students. But maybe I detect a slight change of heart with this council. At the recent council meeting with the education unions, the newly appointed cabinet member for A Fairer Start seemed to leave the door open for this. So rather than outright opposing academies, she told us that we would have to wait until Labour published their manifesto at next year's election before we hear their views on academies. Now, another complaint we constantly hear about are the funding issues in some schools. We all know that some schools' funding is very tight. I get that. I really do get that. But I have to say that we were told at the recent, Councillor Mason, that at the recent schools forum, 51 schools increased their surpluses by a total of £4.75 million. Let me repeat that. 51 schools increased their surpluses by a total of £4.75 million. Across all Ealing schools, there is a total surplus of more than £22 million. Every year for the past few years, school surpluses have increased year on year, but you'd never believe that if you listen to Labour councillors. Now, from all the publicity hype, our Labour councillors seem wedded to LTNs. By every measure so far, they have said they don't want, the residents have said they don't want LTNs. There have been 2 marches to the town hall, 2 marches with thousands of people. The council's own commonplace platform is a sea of red objections. The pro-LTN petition has less than 1,000 signatures, while the anti-LTN petition has over 12,000 petitions. If you're looking for the statistics, I've got them right here, Councillor Mason, from Ealing Schools Forum, so I've got them if you're looking for them. We can agree that we should reduce car usage. However, LTNs are not the way to do that. They have created division within the neighbourhood, resulting in considerable bad feeling. So many residents have told me that they have to drive further to do their business, creating inconvenience. Many have told me that the barriers create a false sense of security for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers alike, as it's not clear who has the right of way. Many cyclists cycle through the barriers without looking, whilst drivers have to cut the corners to negotiate the barriers. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, let's see how the residents respond to this latest consultation.
The time is up, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be voting in favour of this plan this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Nagpal.
Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to be speaking here tonight as the Cabinet Member for A Fairer Start. We put together the council plan for this year in the context of some huge challenges. In 2014, we were faced with Brexit, Tory austerity, and broken markets. Now in 2021, we're still dealing with all of those challenges, but now we have to deal with a public health crisis unprecedented in our lifetimes. COVID-19 has impacted many groups differently, and for our children, it's been difficult. While they've been less likely to get seriously ill, children have lost weeks of school. They've not been able to go to nursery, they've not been able to see their friends, their whole lives have been turned upside down. Their mental health has suffered as a consequence, which is one of the reasons I'm so angry to see the government continue to mismanage their response to COVID-19. Children need stability, they need to see their friends, they need to be back at school in a normal manner. But every bad call from the government makes another wave and lockdown more likely. Ealing has some of the best schools in the country. 91% of our primary schools and 93% of our secondary schools are currently judged to be good or outstanding. 100% of our special schools are currently judged to be good or outstanding. 92% of all Ealing schools have signed up to Ealing Learning Partnership. 70% of foster carers have now completed the Nurturing Attachments Programme, which is the training component of the Brighter Futures practice model for children's services. Our support to care leavers includes newsletters, food parcels, increased subsistence payments, and additional food financial support for those who require it. We've got an ambitious council plan here, and I could talk all evening about our plans for our children and young people to give them the best start in life. I'm particularly proud of the work we're doing on school readiness at the moment. School readiness is important because research shows that if a child isn't ready for school, they're less likely to do well at school. It will impact them for years to come, and they're more likely to drop out of school. Due to the pandemic, this is incredibly important work. There are families that need this support now more than ever. I'm also very proud of our plans to promote deep leadership in schools in addressing equalities issues, particularly those arising from the Race Equality Review. Our Black and Afro-Caribbean children are more likely to be excluded from school regardless of their socioeconomic background. And that's why I'm proud that we will launch cohort 2 of our No Learner Left Behind Black Caribbean Achievement Programme following the success of cohort 1. So schools maintain a focus on tackling unconscious bias, cultural competency, and curriculum experience for our Black Caribbean learners. I'm proud that every school will have access to high quality COVID recovery centered on our children and young people's mental health and well-being, and that every school will have access to high quality guidance, training and platforms to build capacity in tackling new vulnerabilities and priorities. As part of building an open, inclusive and transparent council, we're looking to prioritize the voices of young people and involve them in the work we're doing. I'm proud to be a member of the Cabinet delivering this council plan that has 3 strong priorities: creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and facing inequality.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got Councillor Stafford who want to speak online. Yes, Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and hopefully you can hear me. And I'm excited to be the first councillor to speak in a debate in the hybrid version of this council. So I hope you can hear me, and I apologise that you can see me for my slightly informal attire, given how warm it is. Can I associate my comments, my condolences to the families the family of the councillor who died, and indeed to wish all councillors and all Ealing residents a happy Eid Mubarak for those who are celebrating it. I read through this document with some interest, of course. With a new leader and an almost new cabinet, one was expecting perhaps to see a shift in tone and hopefully, more importantly, a shift in policy. And in fact, I saw neither. This is the same old Labour Party trotting out the same old stagnant, uninspiring, unambitious rubbish that we've seen over the last 10 years. And the reality is that despite a new leader, nothing has changed. Councillor Mason talks about open, inclusive and transparent, but it's all talk. And we know it's all talk because of what we've seen since this administration, or his administration, I should put it in those terms, took over. Look at LTNs. Now, Councillor Costigan says that we're not in favour of consultation. She must have read some marketing manual that says if you repeat a lie over and over again, some people might believe it. Well, they don't and they won't, Councillor Costigan. They know that we were on the side of the residents. They know that we've been fighting against the LTNs that have caused pollution, caused misery, damaged business and hurt residents. They know which side the Conservative group was on, and they also know which side the Labour group is on. And I think they are worried, as some of the previous councillors have said, that you are going to renege on your promise to implement the results of these recommendations. And the fact that you have not said that you will implement the result of the consultation in the plan is telling. Number two, you talk a good game about the recycling and about climate change. But as has already been said, you're closing Acton Recycling Centre. And the argument from Councillor Costigan seems to be, well, the centre didn't provide all the services that perhaps one would like it to provide. So rather than beefing up that centre, allowing people to bring more things to that recycling centre, the answer from this administration is to close it, making it much more difficult for people in the south and the southeast of the borough to recycle. All talk again. And then we move on to the genuinely affordable homes. Now, of course, the council has said that it was going to build 2,500 genuinely affordable homes by the end of the administrative period. But we don't get the figure for that. We always get this mealy-mouthed figure about built and on site, which means that maybe someone put a brick down. If this administration was truly committed to transparency, it would publish the figure of how many genuinely affordable homes had actually been built and that residents are actually living in. And it's not just about genuinely affordable houses or homes, it's about genuinely livable homes. Now, I know that Councillor Mason sneers at the term of Queen of the Suburbs. He thinks it's antiquated, parochial, middle class, something of a time long gone. But the reality is, it's not, because the Queen of the Suburbs is not just a name. It reflects what we want, which is family homes. Those homes that people will want to live in for the long term, not skyscrapers, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom flats, which quite often are being sold off overseas, and where they're for transigent people who want to stay in Ealing for a couple of years and quite rightly move somewhere where they can get a bigger property. This council should be building genuinely livable homes, and he could start doing that by building some genuinely livable homes on the Percival House site. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we are reaching 9:30 now. And if you want to continue the meeting, then constitutionally, we need 14 members of the council to agree.
Agreed.
So do we have 14?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's more than 14. That's fine. So we'll continue until 10. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was determined to stick in a disciplined way to the speech that I prepared, but as is the way of these things, some of the things that have been said on the other side of this hall have driven me to distraction and diversion. In particular, Councillor Young's speech. Now, I don't know whether the leader of the council should be flattered to be compared with Robespierre by the bastion of the ancien regime, the eternal tally roll of the Conservative group, but I personally would probably find it flattering. But here he is leading for them this evening. Where was Councillor Stafford, we wondered. Then we saw his hostage video, and I think all is a little clearer, even if we don't know whose yacht he's bound and gagged on. I want to say something about, in particular, this nonsense.
Your dreams, Councillor, in your dreams.
This nonsense about core spending power, this deceit from government that he has parroted. I'll tell those watching what core spending power is. It's the government taking credit for the increase in council tax that you paid. It's the government taking credit for the social care precept that you paid year on year on year. That's what this is. It's an absolutely disgraceful misrepresentation of the years and years of financial austerity that this and other councils have been put under, that my predecessors, Councillor Johnson and Councillor Mahfouz, have had to defend our services against year on year, over a decade of cuts, and it hasn't stopped. If anybody from the Conservative group had bothered to attend Cabinet last week, they would have seen the current projection in the medium-term financial forecast. So I don't want to hear nonsense about the beneficence, the benevolence of government. We know the truth in this chamber. This government has sought to crush the independent spirit of local government, and it will not succeed. Meanwhile, back at my speech, in the role I now have, I will perhaps speak a little quicker than I otherwise would. The core, defending our communities against the impact of those cuts and helping our community and the organisations and businesses within it to build resilience and build new capacity for the years ahead. We need them to build the trust in us to help them to help themselves. We need to innovate new ways to get the most from those shrinking resources. We need to collaborate in an inclusive way with the local community groups and businesses to develop a resilient borough economy post-COVID. And we need to be accountable to our residents for the money that we raise and the way that we spend it. And then, in a virtuous circle, helping to build their trust. So a lot of this, clearly, it's about protecting incomes, it's about inequality, but even within my portfolio, we haven't lost track of the climate change commitment, because we will drive even more determinedly within the pension fund an approach to responsible investment that will support our objective for net carbon zero. And within my portfolio, over the next year, the approach to driving social value will be at the heart, not only of my portfolio, but I think at the heart of what the council does, and is how the community responds to COVID and to the eternal attacks by Councillor Young's government. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jasbir Anand, you only have 4 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the past 18 months have been immensely challenging for Ealing communities. The scarring from COVID is deep and will take a long time to heal. For too many, that comes in the form of personal loss, whether from losing family members or friends to this dreadful disease, or from the impacts of long COVID. Mr. Mayor, alongside this is the loss of opportunity, of jobs, livelihoods, and businesses in one of the most heavily economically impacted boroughs in the country. COVID has also shone a harsh light on inequalities of income, access to good housing, and on environmental inequality. But Mr. Mayor, there's been hope too. Across the borough, communities have rallied around in an incredible way, providing mutual aid, support, and help to those who need it. This has come through community groups, faith groups, and the voluntary sector. Mr. Mayor, the experience of the pandemic has shown that here in Ealing, we have huge reservoirs of community spirit. And as Cabinet Member for Thriving Communities, I want to pay tribute to that spirit, work, and commitment. We all hope that we're moving towards the end of this pandemic. As we move onwards as a council, we want to keep that community involvement going, and this plan is an early step in setting out how we do with that. Mr. Mayor, as a new administration, we have committed to a spirit of openness and transparency. This is vital, not only in helping us find the right way forward on contentious issues, but also in ensuring we are open to new ideas from the community. To ensure that community and voluntary groups see the council as an enabling and constructive partner as we work together towards meeting our shared goals of creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and fighting inequality. Mr. Mayor, I'm delighted that this council plan sets out some of our shared success working with the community over the past months. Using the Ealing Together program to bring together over 1,000 people who wanted to volunteer during the pandemic, providing vital support, and now using that resource to encourage ongoing volunteering. Mr. Mayor, securing the future of our 4 of our local libraries through the enthusiasm and commitment of our community supported by the council. We continue to support the voluntary and community sector through the crisis with our grants program. Mr. Mayor, in the last year to come, we will go further reshaping our Thriving Communities program and to encourage engagement, participation, and volunteering. Keep that silver lining of increased community activity, even as the clouds of the pandemic pass away. Mr. Mayor, this is an ambitious council plan. Our borough and our communities deserve nothing less. The challenges that face us, we emerge from the COVID, are huge and simply add to the exciting crisis of climate inequality and austerity. Mr. Mayor, will only be successful in tackling those challenges if we do so hand in hand with our communities as a council that is open and transparent, a great partner for everyone who wants to make this borough a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anand, for timekeeping. Councillor Munro will speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really pleased to be here tonight to support the new council plan and our 3 new priorities: creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and fighting inequality. My focus is on making sure that growth in Ealing works for the people who live here. Councillor Bowell, you can listen and you understand what good growth is in a minute. That it attracts employers and brings good, well-paid jobs for local people. That it helps us rather than hinders us in tackling the climate crisis. For example, Councillor Young, Margaret Thatcher is quoted as saying, anybody seen in a bus over the age of 30 has been a failure in life. Mr. Mayor, as most of my colleagues are aware, I was rather larger in shape before COVID than I currently am. Lockdown enabled me to change my life in that I started walking every day during lockdown. And I'm proud to say I have given up my pride and joy 7 Series BMW in favor of walking and using the bus. So we need a public transport system to enable residents to have the choice to work locally and have access to services within walking distance. And that works for everyone, making Ealing a better place to live. For example, many residents oppose the new Greystar development near my ward in Greenford Green, including the opposition over there. I was there on Sunday when in the open square, families were enjoying the open space alongside the children playing with the new water feature, which they really enjoyed. Many residents enjoyed watching movies and football in the outdoor theatre provided as part of their Section 106 obligations. And what are family homes, Councillor Stafford? 61% of the demand in this borough is for 1 and 2 bedroom properties. That's also a family home. Only about 30% is for 3 bedroom properties. We're pledged to make sure that we'll build an open, inclusive, and transparent culture in the council. That means listening to everyone and being honest about the challenges we face, and being prepared to engage in a robust debate about finding policy options to tackle these issues. We've had 11 years of austerity, as Councillor Donnelly has indicated, and it's made it very difficult for us to provide and deliver everything we would want to for local people. That doesn't mean we're not ambitious. It just means that we have to engage with local people about their priorities and put them in a driving seat of change in their communities. In my role, that means meeting with Save Gurnell campaigners to talk about the options for the site and being honest about the £18 million we've been quoted to bring it back into safe use. It also means engaging with Stop the Towers campaign. We've had constructive and open discussions around these concerns and have improved the level of communication and understanding of the many factors that influence decision-making in the council. Talking to local people about how we can ensure that we preserve the things they value about their neighborhoods, whilst delivering the investment, genuinely affordable homes, infrastructure and regeneration
Time, Councillor.
that will benefit our borough. I think it means that our local plan needs to have a review of the character of Eden's local areas, implementing town development plans, and setting out clear rights for residents to shape and control the decisions being taken in their communities on housing and employment growth. So I'm proud to support our new council plan this evening. Thank you.
Councillor Lauren Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this council plan. As others have made clear tonight already, under Tory austerity, Ealing Labour has had to make tough decisions, but we have always been sure where our priorities lie and always done our utmost to protect the most vulnerable in our society. For the past 17 months, we have found ourselves in a new era, that of a gripping pandemic that has changed the world as we knew it forever. The task before this administration now is to lead our residents out of it as safely and securely as we can. The council plan before us tonight is geared up to do this. It focuses strongly on the three key priorities Councillor Mason spoke of earlier, absolutely central to taking our borough to a place where our residents can be assured that their council really understands the need to bring good jobs to the borough, as Councillor Mahfouz has said, the need to tackle climate change, as Councillor Costigan highlighted, and the need to fight relentlessly against inequalities wherever and whenever they arise, as Councillor Raza is championing. As portfolio holder for genuinely affordable homes, I want to say a bit about what we're doing to alleviate homelessness and overcrowding in our borough. We have circa 10,000 households in need on our housing register, waiting for a council home, and the demand for high quality affordable housing in Ealing far outstrips the supply. We set ourselves an ambitious target of delivering 2.5 genuinely affordable homes during this administration, and I'm very pleased to say that we are well on target, with 1,965 either completed or on site now. And over the next year, I will be focused on hitting that target. We've been the most ambitious council house building council in London. And I will continue the focus on regenerating 7 of our estates, as well as the new homes being built by our own development company, Broadway Living. In time, we will ensure that surpluses generated by Broadway Living are reinvested in building more homes rather than lost into external developers' hands. And we are ensuring that ownership of the land stays with our council. Broadway Living currently plans to build 1,500 new, high-quality homes, roughly 2/3 of which will be at genuinely affordable rent levels. But my role is more than just building council homes that we need. It's about ensuring that everything that we do is open, inclusive, and transparent, and that we empower our tenants to feel ownership in their communities. No one is more invested in a housing estate than the people who live on it, and we want their voices to be front and centre. I will also be working with the voluntary sector to find innovative solutions to continue supporting people sleeping on the streets, some of whom engaged with us for the first time during this pandemic, and for whom this is probably a once-in-a-lifetime chance to help. And I will work with not-for-profit organisations such as Capital Letters and Place
to continue increasing the supply of good quality private and modular homes available to us as temporary accommodation for our homeless families, a much more appropriate alternative to bed and breakfast hotels.
Time, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, I'm proud to be part of this new Labour cabinet and to work as a team to deliver this manifesto pledges we made to local people in 2018. And I'm excited to see what we can achieve together over the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brett. Councillor Wall, can you switch? Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, we're here to talk about the positive plans Ealing Labour are putting forward to support our residents over the coming year. But before we commence, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on where we actually are. We've been living with over a decade of austerity. Yes, some, in particular on this side of the room, might roll their eyes and think old news, but it's far from it, I'm afraid. As I speak now, the consequences of austerity are continuing to seep through our communities and are still affecting our residents on a daily basis. Let's remember, austerity wasn't inevitable. It was a political decision by the Tory party that hasn't been without significant consequences for our residents and our council. Also, after the last 18 months, we have seen a global pandemic, which has changed the way we live, work and educate and socialise. It has also highlighted the inequalities in our borough, with people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups being disproportionately affected. And I just want to say, because we just had this, despite the so-called Freedom Day, COVID hasn't gone away. And one thing that we don't have is Boris Johnson. He's not suddenly going to click his fingers. He's not a magician and COVID isn't gone. Hasn't gone. We need to, sorry, hold on. Given the government's mishandling of the crisis, we'll need to constantly plan, adapt and support our services for our residents. Ealing Labour is the party to do this. Drive a level-headed process forward and support our community when they need it most. Poverty has been rising at a rapid rate, and the gap between the richest and the poorest is only widening. Austerity and now COVID have only accelerated this. This includes a third of Ealing Borough's children living in poverty. Yes, that's a third of our children in our borough currently living below the poverty line. It's unacceptable and action needs to be taken. We have lack of job security and COVID has hit the employment market in Ealing worse than any other borough, as we've heard. The scars of this are very visible and in the sad increases in homelessness, especially around Ealing Broadway. Furthermore, we have in-work poverty and it's on the rise and exacerbated again by the COVID crisis. And people who are working are now not being able to pay bills and having to be able to pay for the most basic things like food. And let's not forget the climate crisis. We've heard a lot about that tonight. Climate change has happened, it's gone, we're in crisis now, and we need to work together to make our borough climate resilient, forward-thinking and green in every way we can. And although it seems like I'm spending a long time talking about and dwelling on the issues, I think it's important to remind ourselves of where we are and the situation we're in, because decisions that we make as a local government and decisions that the government make on a national level are affecting people's lives. Ealing Labour is proud of what it's achieved given the circumstances I've mentioned. And tonight we have set out a future plan with 3 clear priorities: creating good jobs, tackling the climate crisis and fighting inequality. These are broad and tackle a wide-ranging issues, but we are determined to make a difference. They're not exhaustive, and as a Labour Council, we will constantly strive to listen, review and adapt to our residents' needs as they change, especially during this unpredictable time.
Thank you. Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to start by just helping out a few of the fellow councillors. So Councillor Malcolm mentioned that the construction carbon offset charge was not sufficient. Well, I would, as chair of the scrutiny panel that looked at our climate and emergency strategy, he should be aware that there's a review and a recommendation to change that. We're working in collaboration with other councils and we'll be addressing that. That's work in hand. Councillor Milliken mentioned about the reserves for schools. He should know, as I was a member of the education forum in Ealing, that there's a mechanism to claw back excessive reserves and then redistribute that to the high needs block grant provision. So that's in hand and it's already there. So I hope Councillor Milliken will give a fuller picture in future. But my focus really is on about an issue that's hardly been mentioned tonight, and it's one of the most significant for our borough in terms of individuals' quality of life and on a very specific individual basis. It's had some mention, but I don't think it's had enough to take it forward. My focus is about adult social care. So it's one of the largest areas of our expenditure at over 120 million. To put that into a more understandable and real and appreciable figure, that's over £300,000 every single day of the year. Weekday, weekend days, holidays, £300,000 every single day. And yet it's one of our most challenging areas. Now we've got a strong track record in our Better Lives programme, and I appreciate Councillor Conti raising good targets and work that's been done in this area. But we can also really recognise the work done by officers, especially with our care homes during the pandemic. We provided PPE, we provided support, we provided guidance, and that intervention meant that Ealing's care homes were in the bottom quarter in terms of care deaths, deaths in care due to COVID. And that's real recognition of the council work and the council officers and that dedication. We need to salute that, and I hold that in high esteem, and thank you to officers there. Going forward, what have we got to look forward to? Well, we were told on the steps of Downing Street by Boris Johnson that he had a plan to tackle long-term social care. A plan, it was ready to go. But what do we see? Nothing. In fact, we had just 9 words in the Queen's speech to acknowledge what's going to happen. And all that was said was that we're going to have future recommendations coming forward. He said those words about a future plan being ready to go in 2019. COVID wasn't on the horizon at that point. And what do we see? We see no progress. Prevarication yet again. Ealing Council isn't waiting for the government to get its act together. We're doing something innovative and continuing some really impressive work. We're looking at cooperatives as a way of taking our services forward. We're looking at cooperatives in both how we provide services and also how we actually engage with care providers. So that could help with providing better working conditions, better pay, more security of employment, and more longevity of service and contact with our residents, which is crucial, that personal relationship between carer and resident, to make sure they have a proper quality service. So we need to recognise that we've gone a long way. Going forward,
Councillor.
Thank you very much. I'd say we recommend you endorse this. There's lots of adventurous work going on. We endorse this council plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to go straight to Councillor Mason and ask him to sum up now. Councillor, I know it may not be, but that's the time now, and we are reaching nearly 10 o'clock now. So we'll only have time to sum up and then wind the meeting up. Okay, go on, you speak first.
It isn't just music, it's an overview. I think I'll forgive him because he's new to this, but we do a lot in the music service. It's about reading readiness. If you'd have listened and read properly, it's a big plan. And so there's no history. Councillor Young needs to have some history lessons. I'll do it privately with him. I was quite shocked by his talk about comparing Councillor Mason to Robespierre. If I was Councillor Mason, I'd be quite offended. I might organise for me to go and do him in and pretend he was Marriott and put him in the bath. But I think he needs some history lessons. Councillor Conti, we'll forgive him as well. He started off being quite complimentary, but he went downhill as well. And I don't know where the Liberals are. I don't think they know where they are. They start off reasonably well. Councillor Malcolm made some quite good comments, but then he always starts to go down. Well, I don't think Councillor Ball knew where he was at all night. Talking about, there was a lot of hypocrisy from the other side. How can Councillor Costigan say in advance what's going to happen as a result of consultation? She can't. That's why we're having a consultation. She can't say this, this, and this. That's what she's doing. So she is listening to people. She can't make an announcement in advance. There was a lot of hypocrisy over there. And Councillor Milliken's been very, very wicked. He was how to lie with statistics, how to interpret things wrongly. He knows very well that Labour is against academies and trusts. He was just misinterpreting things, and I'll give him a lesson later too. Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Mason, you can sum up the report now.
As ever, Councillor Johnson has rather stolen my thunder, and we can make sort of historical comparisons all night, or we can sort of cut to the facts. And, you know, I sort of listened to Councillor Milliken quoting the numbers. You know, he mentioned his declaration of interest. I'll mention another of his declarations of interest, the fact that he's a director of the Grand Union Multi-Academy Trust that ran a 7% profit in its last financial year, recorded at Companies House, compared to the 1% that was reinvested by Ealing Schools back into its services. And what that tells you is that the public sector do its better for less and are more efficient. And we're not going to take any lessons from the Conservative Party that wish to see all of our schools academised and put into a situation where profit is the driving motive for the way that schools are run in this country and not for public good. I won't take any lessons from the Conservative Party about planning or tall buildings. When they talk of levelling up, what they actually mean is that they are going to set a bonfire to planning regulations as they have done already. And why? To take away the voice of individuals in their ability to engage in a democratic debate about the future of our towns. That's their agenda, an agenda supported by the donations made to the Conservative Party after Richard Desmond sits next to the Secretary of State to call in a major application. We know the hypocrisy of what they have already discussed this evening about our ability to vaccinate this borough, setting targets that cannot be achieved when they starve our NHS of the resources it needs, the vaccinations that it requires to be able to get up to that 92% target. At the same time, yesterday, as the so-called Freedom Day that they themselves had to U-turn. And the mother of all hypocrisies, their own government that support active travel, that support low traffic neighbourhoods as a way of tackling the climate crisis, that support cycling schemes, that support the infrastructure that we need to encourage people to get out of their cars, like Councillor Manro has so clearly described. They support it nationally, but locally, nothing. Opposition for opposition's sake, nothing more, no vision. And I'll say to the Liberal Democrats, we also know what happened in 2010. What happened in 2010? Your political party supported their political party to impose 11 years of austerity onto local government and to this country that has seen us lose 64% in every pound. So we'll take your support on the things that you wish to support in this administration, but we're never going to let you forget the fact that you are culpable for the situation that this country now finds itself in. When other parts of the world were investing in crisis, you were supporting austerity that stripped this country of what it needed. At the same time, where countries were investing came out of the economic crisis very, very clearly and very, very better. So we're not going to take those lessons. What we are going to do as an administration, as a party that stands proudly on its record of delivering genuinely affordable homes, of securing apprenticeships and delivering not 30,000 new trees in this borough, 37,000 new trees. We are proud of our record and we are proud of the council plan that we are putting forward, because we will build an open, inclusive and transparent culture in this council and in this borough, and we will absolutely remain committed to creating good jobs, to tackling the climate crisis and to fighting inequality. And I move the plan.
Thank you. I'm going to take the vote on this report, on this plan, and the vote is only from the members who are present in the chamber. Those in favor, can you raise hand, please? Those against? Abstention? Okay, so the plan is approved. I move quickly on to the next item, 10B, proposed changes to the council constitution in relation to the Health and Wellbeing Board. Agreed? Item number 11, urgent key decision exempted from coal-in. Agreed? Appointment to the committees noted. And other bodies?
Noted.
Did anybody speak? Okay. Now, before we end the meeting, I'm nearly there. I want to congratulate those who made their maiden speeches, Councillor Gallant, and if Councillor Brett made her maiden speeches. Congratulations and welcome again. Usually I would be inviting to the mayor parlor for a drink, but I have taken the decision this time to avoid that, even though the restrictions are lifted, but we are still taking a cautious approach. So we will give it a miss, as mayor parlor cannot accommodate that many people in it. So we will give it a miss, and maybe next time we will make some arrangements. So with the date of next meeting will be on the 19th of October. We close the meeting, and I thank you for your patience and contribution.